Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Sylvia and every week I talk about a new true crime case that has really intrigued me, and these are almost always unsolved cases. So if you're interested in anything like that, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. Also, if you're not new here and you're a returning subscriber, then an extra special welcome to you. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. I really appreciate it. Today's case is about the mysterious death of a 6-year-old girl named Katherine Korzilius. That sounds like a Harry Potter character, but that's her real name. And somehow, Jon Bon Jovi is involved in this case. So if any of that's interesting to you, then keep watching. Let's get into it. Katherine Korzilius was the daughter of Paul and Nancy Korzilius. They married in the 80s and they lived in Austin, Texas. However, it's more like Nancy lived in Austin, Texas because Paul very often traveled for work. He had a highly desired and high-paying job. He was the personal manager for Jon Bon Jovi, the rock star. So in the 80s and 90s, they were making bank. He had been with Jon since the beginning of his career, and the release of his third album, Slippery When Wet, which included the tracks Livin' on a Prayer, Dead or Alive, and You Give Love a Bad Name. I think that's the name of that song. But I'm sure you've heard at least one of these songs, if not all of them. I guarantee you if Livin' on a Prayer was playing at a karaoke night, a bunch of people would know the lyrics. These are 3 quintessential rock songs, and they were all on the same album, and Paul was involved in the production and release of this album. So you can imagine like the excitement that this family had, as well as the fame and fortune that they were coming into alongside Jon Bon Jovi. And you'd think that this family would just go on to live the dream life, but unfortunately that is not the case, and that is why I'm sitting here today. Katherine Korzilius was 6 at the time of the story, and she lived in a fancy neighborhood of Austin, Texas, with her mom, her dad, and her 9-year-old brother, Chris. They lived off of Elder Circle, which you can tell by the name is a circular street, and it branched off of a busier road. Living on Elder Circle, you would think that this was a safer area to live in since there were no cars speeding through, because if you were entering into this area, you were likely visiting one of the houses, so why would you be speeding to go pull into a driveway? Another thing too, because it was a circle, everyone who was pulling onto this road either lived there or was visiting somebody who lived there. So it was a lot safer in that aspect because there were going to be a lot less strangers around. It's really important to the context of this story to understand the street that Katherine lived on. So like I said, it was a circle, and the family lived kind of like in the middle of this circle. Like if you got into the entrance and you looped around, they lived almost on the exact halfway point of this circle. And mailboxes were located at the beginning or the entrance of the neighborhood, and because it's a circle, the entrance and the exit are the same exact point. So the mailboxes are at the beginning, and you enter and then you drive around the circle. You would pass the Korzilius house, and then you'd keep driving around the circle, and then you would reach the exit point, which was the same as the entrance point. I feel like I'm over explaining this, but understanding the street that she lived on is really important to this case. This is one of those neighborhoods that has a shared mailbox area for all of the houses. So instead of the mailboxes being in front of each individual house, there's just one giant mailbox at the front of the neighborhood. This brings us to 4 p.m. on August 7th, 1996. It was a sunny day, and Katherine and her mom and brother were getting the mail after coming home from a day of running errands. They had a little routine that they would do, and it was where Katherine would get out of the car and she would get the mail for her mom, hand it through the window, and then she would walk home alone. Because they lived on a circle, like I said, it's very important to understand where their house was in relation to their street. Her mom would then turn left and take the long way home, and then Katherine would keep walking straight and take the short way home. The short way home was like a 3-minute walk, and it was less than a quarter mile. So her mom would usually arrive a few minutes before Katherine because a car is way faster than a walking 6-year-old. And then Katherine would arrive a few minutes later. Katherine would specifically ask her mom to do this, and her mom always described her as a very independent little girl. So she would let her do it. And like I said, they lived on a neighborhood they lived on a street that wasn't a through street. So it was very safe, and her mom never felt uncomfortable doing this. They had also done it multiple times before. However, on this particular day, when Katherine's mom looked in her rearview mirror and saw Katherine walking towards their house, this would be the last time that she would ever see her daughter alive. They get home and start unloading the groceries, and 15 minutes later, 9-year-old Chris points out to his mom that Katherine has not arrived home yet. So their mom, Nancy, tells Chris to go outside and see if he sees Katherine. He comes in a few minutes later, teary-eyed, and says, "Mom, she's not there." At first, Nancy isn't too worried. She thinks that Katherine likely just stopped at one of the neighboring houses to say hi. So she grabs Chris and gets in the car, and they knock on the neighbor's door. The neighbors answer, and he says that he has not seen Katherine. This neighbor is described as a boy. I'm not sure how old he is, but I feel like that indicates that he's like under the age of 20. Just a few minutes later, Katherine's mom circles her car around Elder Circle and comes upon Katherine's body. Katherine is lying in the middle of the street, almost as if she just like laid down flat on her stomach and went to sleep. So, like I said, the location of their house on the circle is very important to this case. And when Katherine's body is found, she is on the opposite side of the circle than the direction that she was supposed to be walking in. If she was walking the shorter route that her mom says that she was found past their house. So I don't know why she would just pass her house like that unless she decided to walk the opposite route and do the long way around. So I drew a map, and her mom would be driving the blue route and Katherine would have been walking the green route. Her hair is described as being very flat and arranged, and her clothes are like fitted properly over her, like there's no wrinkles or folds in them, and her feet are pointed with her sandals still on them. This is how Katherine's mom describes finding the scene, and her description is really all we have to go off of, because she then makes the decision to pick up Katherine's body and put her in her car to rush her to the hospital. Katherine at this point is not dead. She's breathing and she clearly needs medical attention. So that was why Nancy made this decision instead of like leaving her there as if this was a crime scene. At the nearby hospital, Katherine is placed on a ventilator and the doctors examine her for injuries. They find that her skull is fractured and that she's brain dead. This is a very severe injury, but it's really the only serious issue that they have with her body. She had scrapes on both of her elbows, her lower back, her left shoulder, and her right hip, but these were just, minor abrasions. The real root of the problem here was the fact that she had a skull fracture and she was brain dead. And unfortunately, the doctors try their best, but there's really nothing they can do. And Katherine passes away at 11:30 p.m. on August 7th, 1996. Nancy phones Paul, who is in New York City with Jon Bon Jovi, and they are in like a sort of business dinner, and it also happens to be Paul's birthday. And being the manager of a very successful rock star, he, regularly had to work his birthday. And when he gets this phone call from his wife, at first he actually thinks that she's calling to wish him happy birthday, but unfortunately it's the opposite. She is telling him that his daughter is in critical condition and he needs to come home immediately. Jon Bon Jovi arranges for his private jet to take Paul directly to Austin, and even with this extra help, he arrives 1 hour late when his daughter is already gone. Since Katherine was found laying in the street alone, at first, everyone rightfully thinks that this is a hit-and-run accident. There's a $5,000 reward put up for information on the driver that hit and killed Katherine. It's even printed as such in the newspaper. But when the coroner examines her body, he finds disturbing evidence that suggests otherwise. Katherine's injuries were not the result of a hit and run. Like I said, the only serious injury to her body was the one to her head. The rest were just minor abrasions. And when you get hit by a car, you have extremely serious injuries. You're likely to have multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, and Katherine had none of this. The coroner finds that her injuries are more consistent with jumping or falling from a moving vehicle rather than a vehicle colliding with her body. I'm putting a diagram of the autopsy up on the screen for you guys so that you can see like where all of her injuries were. But yes, her injuries were not consistent with a hit and run. It seemed like she was either thrown from a vehicle or jumped from a vehicle. So that leads the police to realize that they need to investigate this in a very different way. But unfortunately, there's no crime scene because her mom had picked her up and taken her to the ER. And then since she was in the ER, multiple people were touching her body. So swabbing for DNA is basically impossible. There's really no DNA evidence in this case. But she had fallen off the SUV on the way home, and that is why she is found laying there on the street. And this would also explain her placement on the opposite side of the circle, rather than like if she was found along the route that she was supposed to be walking. But there are some issues with this because I feel like her mom would notice in her rearview mirrors if someone was on her car, or at least that like her daughter had fallen off of the car. Like, you have the mirrors in the car, so I feel like you'd be able to like see the movement behind you and you'd look back and see what happened. Another thing that people really question about this case is how Katherine would be able to like jump onto the bumper of the car being a 6-year-old girl. First of all, she had an SUV, so it would have been very high up. Another factor is the fact that this was August in Texas, so the temperatures were in the high 90s. It would have been way too hot to hold on to a metal car. We've all touched a seatbelt that's been sitting in a car and suffered practically a 3rd-degree burn. So that is really unlikely. And then another thing is that Katherine had a broken thumb at the time of this accident. Her thumb was in a splint, and that also would make it very unlikely that she would do an activity like this where you really have to rely on your grip. But then again, 6-year-olds, I don't think really have good logical reasoning skills. So maybe she did all of this anyway. An alternative to grabbing the back of the car theory is that she could have fallen from the back of another car. So Nancy does say that she saw Katherine walking the opposite direction towards their house when she drove off. And it's possible that while she was on her walk, a neighbor pulled up beside her and offered her a ride. This is all fun and games. Maybe she's hanging out of the window. Maybe she's hanging on the back of the car and they're driving her around. They decide to do an extra loop and Katherine falls off. The driver does not want to get in trouble because I guess they were being negligent, letting a child ride on their car in this dangerous fashion. So they never come forward. But because they feel remorse, that's why she's laid so neatly. That would indicate guilt on behalf of whoever did that. So they would, arrange her body and then go into their house and act surprised when they find out about Katherine's death. There's another theory that Nancy staged a hit and run because she had accidentally killed her own daughter. This could be either by backing into her, which would knock her to the ground and likely kill the 6-year-old, or by abuse. But a lot of people say that this is really unlikely. First of all, Nancy was absolutely distraught at the death of her only daughter, and she also participated in the investigation, and they even hired a PI to do further investigation. She also underwent hypnosis to see if she had any repressed memories from the time of the accident that could help identify what happened to Katherine. But nothing ever came of this. But the PI did find some other interesting information. The PI brought out some scent dogs to the Korzilius' neighborhood so that they could try to track where Katherine had gone. The dogs did pick up her scent at the mailbox, and they also pick up her scent at a vacant lot that was located right next to the mailboxes. This was not along the route, and it seems like Katherine may have branched off to go into this vacant lot. And once the dogs traced her scent there, they lost it. So what really happens when a dog loses a scent, very often it's when somebody is getting into a car. That's what happened in the Chris Jenkins video I did, and I'll link it above in the little suggestion thing if you're interested in that. But the dogs do trace Katherine's scent to this vacant lot where it then disappears, and that could indicate that she either willingly got into a car or that she was pulled into a car by somebody with bad intentions. Inside the car, it's possible that this injury took place in the car, like somebody hit her over the head, or it's possible that she realized the danger of the situation when she was inside the car with this evil person, and she then jumped out while they were driving along Elder Circle, and that's how she sustained her injuries, and that is how she died. Again, this would have all had to happen in 15 minutes because her mom found her body at 4:15. Her brother went out before 4:15 to try to find Katherine, and he came back in crying and said, "Mom, she's not there." So it's not clear if this 9-year-old boy walked towards the mailboxes and saw that Katherine wasn't there and then went back home, or if he did a full loop around Elder Circle. Another thing that I need to point out is that Katherine may have played in this vacant lot before. Their neighborhood had a lot of woods surrounding it, but then this vacant lot was flat, so it was a more ideal place for a child to run around and play. So it's possible that that's why the dogs traced her scent to this area, just because she might have been there at some point. I don't think dogs can distinguish like an old scent from a new scent. I think they just track like the person's scent. So yes, it's possible that this was an attempted abduction, but then Katherine tried to jump out of the car to save herself and unfortunately hit her head on the pavement, and she passed away because of that. Going back to theories that don't involve foul play, something that people kind of theorized was, what if a car was driving by and they had like equipment on the back and it hit Katherine on the head and then she fell down? Or what if like a truck was driving by and some debris flew off of it and hit Katherine on the head and that's how she died? But that sounds very Final Destination-y to me. That just doesn't sound like an accident that would normally happen. Also, there was no debris found around her body. She was essentially laying on the pavement alone. So that just doesn't sound very likely to me. There's another theory online that this accident may have been caused by a deer. So like I said, their neighborhood was surrounded by woods, and a deer could have bounded out of the forest, knocking Katherine to the ground, and then she sustained a head injury. I think this theory is kind of silly, but I did want to include it because it did have like some traction online. I'm just not really sure. I don't know very much about deer, but I don't know. I just don't really feel like that's very likely that that could have happened to her, but I did want to go ahead and include that maybe she had been like hit by a running deer, because I'm sure that they do run at a high speed and could injure somebody. Whatever theory it may be, it's also possible that Katherine got hit on the head, was disoriented, and was walking along that original route. And because she was disoriented, she passed her house without realizing, and she had a skull fracture. She felt very ill, and she just laid down in the street, which would make sense to why her body looked so neat. Over 20 years later, the strange death of Katherine Korzilius has no solid answer. In present day, Paul Korzilius still works in the music industry and is the head of Bon Jovi Music. I'm not sure what Nancy does because she was a housewife at the time of Katherine's death. Maybe she picked up a job, or maybe she just remained, a homemaker that just took care of Chris and raised him. Chris grew up to be a police officer, but unfortunately, he was killed in the line of duty at the age of 32. And what's really dark and ironic about this is that Chris was also killed in a car crash. He was in an unmarked police vehicle when another car slammed into him, and he went over the median into oncoming traffic, and Chris was killed at the scene. So both of the Korzilius children have died due to cars. And Jon Bon Jovi had met Katherine on several occasions. Here's a photo of the two of them together. And he released a song about his manager's daughter's death on his solo album, Destination Anywhere. This song is called August 7th, 4:15, because that is the time that Nancy discovered Katherine's body. I had a chance to look at the lyrics, and the lyrics go, "God closed his eyes and the world got mean. August 7th, 4:15. So that's all the information I have for you guys on the bizarre death of Katherine Korzilius. As always, I love to hear your opinions. Do you think that she was the victim of a hit and run, even though her autopsy kind of contradicted that? Or do you think that this was an attempted abduction? I would love to hear your thoughts on this case. I don't even know which direction I'm leaning in, because it's weird that the dogs traced her scent to the vacant lot, but it's also, really odd that it was 4:15, it was the middle of the day, people are starting to get home from work, kids are home from school, so this doesn't really seem like a very smart time to try to abduct a child. But again, who knows? I guess that I am leaning more towards maybe it was an accident and she fell from a car like the police theorize, but it just wasn't her mom's car. It was like the neighbor's car. Or I also think that it's very possible that this was an attempted abduction and Katherine realized this when she was inside the car and then opened up the door and jumped out. Also, you've already made it this far, so if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please click the red subscribe button down below so that you don't miss another video. I am working on a really publicized case, and I'm really excited to share this crazy story with you guys, so please subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss that video when it comes out. And until next time, I hope you guys all have a wonderful day and stay safe.